Chapter 5. Watchful had 2 taverns, and neither was particularly worthy of a song. The downwind sat nearer to the bottom of the hill, and was frequented by the strange and poor. The door hung cockeyed, the thin glass window panes glowed with a dirty yellow light, and the smell of sweat and beer wafted out to greet Ollie as he walked toward it. The other tavern was within spitting distance of the mansions at the top of the hill. Ollie had never been inside. He shoved the door of the downwind open against the will of its rusty hinges and kicked the heel of his boot against the doorframe so as to leave a little dirt outside. The tap room should have been spacious, but tables and chairs crowded it so much that even when it was busy, the place felt dead. Ollie grunted as he squeezed and shimmied himself around nicked tables and irritated field hands, murmuring over half-filled mugs, trying to make his way towards the bar. Off to the side, a healthy fire burned inside a brick hearth, but only hot enough to warm half the room. Lanterns hung from chains looped around the rafters, drifting to and fro as the breeze from the door hit them, scattering shadows over the tables, card games, and dirty faces. Familiar faces, most of them. Familiar but not friendly. No one called Ollie's name nor smiled up at him as he made his slow trod through the tavern. As usual, Ollie only lowered his hood and kept moving. He might have been born in Watchful, but he was of the wood. That fact alone bought him distance, and the stories of his father didn't help either. But Ollie wasn't here for beer or games. He wanted to find Lars and see where he'd found a doe, but the aged Strayazar hadn't shown yet. Ollie kept moving toward the bar anyways, trying to focus on the creaking floorboards beneath his boots instead of the wave of silence following him wherever he passed crowded tables. Lars would appear eventually. He'd crave an audience, someone he could cajole into listening to his stories, as overblown as they were. There was a better chance of Skyfire raining down and wiping them all out than for Lars to miss the chance to brag about a hunt, even if his only audience hadn't the slightest idea what he was on about. No one liked the Strayazar, but at least Lars gave them all something to talk about. Ollie leaned on the bar top and eyed the bartender. Ulian was an odd character, even by his own race's standards. He was average height for a Meifa, which meant he stood as tall as Ollie's waist. Like most of his race, he was stocky, with broad shoulders and a thick gut. His head and face were mostly clean-shaven, except for an exotic-looking mustache hanging in braids down to his chest. On his thick nose rested a pair of spectacles, and in his hand, a thick volume with a gray-green cover. He muttered as he read, elbows on the bar top. He'd had the floor behind the bar raised so as always meet his human customers in the eye. Neither his stature nor his avid reading was unique for a Meifa, however. They were a people found, more often than not, in the universities all throughout the kingdoms of Larazarus, or so Ollie had been told. What was odd was Ulian being here, not only in Watchful, but as the owner and bartender of the town's less prosperous tavern. When he'd shown up 6 years earlier, everyone had expected him to take a job tutoring Hilltopper children with the other handful of the race living in Watchful. Instead, he'd bought this place from old Tiskman for no small sum of money, and then he just hadn't left. People had grumbled at first, but when Ulian began playing around with different brews of ale, everyone grew content. Tiskman's swill had been like piss, and had been made only from dirt wheat, but this Meifa knew how to brew ales from fruits and potatoes that went down smooth and easy. Ollie rapped a knuckle on the bar a few handspans away from Ulian, but he had no success in drawing his attention from his reading. Again, Ollie knocked and still nothing. He cleared his throat, then banged on the counter and called out, "Oi, Ool!" "Huh? Oh, I see you, Master Ollie. One moment." Julian threw up a finger and continued reading. Ollie grunted and shook his head. A moment later, the book slapped closed. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. The impact which the meteorological conditions have on the response of fauna and flora in a region heavily influenced by Maia is, well, fascinating. Ollie shrugged. I'm just looking for ale. Julian's brow furrowed. Well, of course, Master Ollie. I made a fresh batch of that Hiawatha grape you like so much. Been 3 full moons now. It's been sitting. So I broke it out this morning. Real good stuff. Ollie placed a copper chit on the bar top, the blurry visage of an old king staring back at him. He groaned inwardly as that little king disappeared into Julian's apron pocket a moment later, swapping it for a mug of frothing ale. Oi, Ul said. Oi, Ollie said, raising the ale in thanks and fighting off sour thoughts. He told himself he wasn't drinking away one of the last chits they had, though he was drinking, and that was one of the last chits they had. He had to talk to Lars, and this was the only place Ollie knew the man would show. Still, even the downwind had standards, and no one sat for free. Besides, 1 chit wouldn't keep them alive through winter. They needed more. A whole deer hide more. And? Julian asked, leaning forward, his spectacles sliding down the bridge of his nose. It's good, Ollie said, wiping his mouth against the back of his sleeve. The Hiawatha berries added a tang which danced in tension with the bitter hops. Oh, that's good. Very, very good. Julian nodded in one of his absent ways that told Ollie he could have said the drink tasted like dung water, and Ul wouldn't have noticed. You know, I was reading the other night about some of the stories told of our fantastical little forest out there. Julian waved in the general direction of the wood. Tales for children mostly, but, well, I wondered if I couldn't get a bit of your time one evening. An ale on me for a few stories of your own, eh? With every word, Ollie's face grew hot. He'd been down this road before with Julian, and he had no intention of going again. The wood is out there for you, with stories enough to share if you'd like. Feel free to go to it and ask all you want. Julian's smile never disappeared, and the light twinkle in his eyes made Ollie want to punch him. The bartender had a way of handling every rush of anger or emotion in downwind with the same resolute smile. It was infuriating. Oi, I thought you would say that, but I've been reading lately, and I've come across something that may interest you. Perhaps we could trade tidbits of knowledge? Ollie stood up straight and shook his head in frustration. There's nothing in them books I need, Ul. I'm sure Lars will run his mouth enough for the both of us. Ask him. Oh, I have, Julian said, eagerly removing his spectacles to clean them on his apron. He's been very helpful. Still, sometimes I can't help thinking that Master Lars, well, lies. I was going to say has an alternate understanding of truth. Ollie snorted. I've known Lars a long time. Rest assured, he lies. In fact, I was hoping to find the little liar here tonight. You seen him? No, Julian said. Not this evening, but he finds his way in here often. But Master Ollie, I was hoping we could continue this conversation about your experiences within the confines of, well, if you see him, let him know I'd like a word, eh? Ollie turned and made his way toward the taproom's hearth, where a pair of wooden chairs soaked up the fire's light and heat. Ollie sank into one, resting the mug on his knee and breathing out a heavy sigh. His eyes watched the dancing and crackling tongues of fire, and for a long time, he was quiet. A little more than an hour later, Lars stalked into the downwind. The taproom had filled out even more, and someone had even taken to playing the flute. The notes sailing along the rafters and above the drawl of banging mugs and raucous voices. And yet, above it all, Ollie made out Lars's gruff growl for beer at the bar. Ollie turned to see Lars's smile fade as Julian whispered in his ear, pointing to Ollie. Begrudgingly, the old woodsman nodded and wound his way through a gaggle of women, tables, and a newly arrived serving boy before he found his way to the chair beside Ollie. Lars sighed as he sat, shifting uncomfortably, then took a long pull of his pint that he held in his hand.
Oi, Julian the Pratt says you wanted to talk.
Lars's voice was a deep rasp, making him sound both angry and out of breath. Though for all Ollie knew, both were true. Lars's face was a ravaged thing. His left eye, the one facing Ollie, was covered with a leather patch beneath which protruded long, aged scars. The cheeks beneath his scraggly beard were pockmarked, and his nose was bulbous from too many breaks. Against all odds, this man had spent 30 winters hunting and killing within the tree line, and he still had his life. It should have made him a legend. Instead, he was universally despised, even amongst the few Strayazar still living. Aye, Ollie said, straightening up. We need to talk. Lars chuckled, his lip curling into a smile that deepened the lines of his scars.
You need to talk. How about I listen and we'll see how this goes, eh?
Lars never turned toward Ollie and pulled his cloak a bit tighter and sat back more relaxed.
Come on, out with it.
Ollie leaned forward, keeping his voice low.
You nabbed a doe today. Big one.
There ain't been a thick deer in the outer bands for near a year. Was it a fluke, or do you know something I oughta? Lars turned so his eye could look Ollie up and down. His breath stank like rotten whiskey, his fingernails black and yellow from years of fidgeting with cheap tobacco.
I ain't never killed nothing off no fluke, boy. That doe came down 'cause I made it, tracked it, stalked it, and downed it, just like that, see?
Inej says you made your way deeper in. That true? You going past the wall?
Well, that old Velt can't keep his trap shut, but he don't tell no tales. That's for sure. I told him true. I went deeper.
He shifted, sipping from his tankard. Past the wall? Ollie asked, voice strained. Lars was silent as he leaned back and turned toward the fire. He took a long pull from his mug and then said,
Aye, past the wall, little Riker. And what's it to you?
Ollie sat back and cursed. But Lars continued on.
Like I said already, ain't no real game anymore about the outskirts. The wood.
Lars stopped and sighed, looking about to see if anyone sat within earshot. When he started again, his rasp of a voice was a touch quieter.
The wood's calling louder now, bringing the beast closer to its heart. Hard to say, but something ain't right. Don't tell me you ain't noticed it too.
The hell's you mean it's calling louder? Lars shook his head.
How are you a Strayazar and you can't feel it? The call is louder than a woman pushing out a babe. Everything is running on in deeper, past the wall.
In a way, Ollie understood exactly what Lars meant. But unlike the older man, Ollie hadn't felt anything shift in the wood. The idea that Lars felt something he couldn't made Ollie's skin crawl. Assuming Lars told the truth anyways. But change or no change, it was impossible not to notice how barren the outer bands had become. Lars leaned back and took another swig of his ale.
Still, whatever it is, it doesn't matter now, does it? All that matters is we best be pulling in meat and furs in plenty before them Westerners come on in to trade, or it'll be a scarce winter. So yeah, old Lars been crossing over the wall into the wood proper once again. Been too long, if you ask me.
Too long? Ollie sat forward. It took everything Ollie had to keep his voice low so wandering ears wouldn't hear. Forever isn't long enough, Lars. We'd all agreed, not beyond the wall, not no more, not after last time.
Lars snorted. I ain't agreed to nothing. And besides, it's been, 7 winters now?
11, Ollie said, voice flat,
and you damn well know it.
11, Lars said, voice drifting.
He'd be nearly 30 then. Ollie said nothing. He knew the he Lars was talking about, and Ollie had no intentions of going there. Ollie had lost a father 11 years ago. Lars, a son. Slowly, Lars stood, swaying on his feet. He looked down, and Ollie could see his reflection in Lars's eyes. When your pa died, he took near everyone with him. Maybe it took a few years for us to figure it out, but we ain't a group no more. We're on our own now, each of us. Whatever pact we had, that's gone, just like your old man, and good riddance to both. Going beyond the wall is dangerous, Lars. Starving is too, understand? Look, I ain't got nothing to hide or to explain. I went past the wall, and I'll be going again. And if you want to eat through this winter, then you're going to be going too. Lars turned to step away, but paused. Ollie looked up, watching the man's mouth twitch. Hate lingered behind that one eye, but Ollie knew it wasn't for him. To Lars, Ollie was just the living embodiment of Roy Ricker, the man who'd convinced Lars' son to venture off toward the wood's heart in search of power. Instead, Lars' son had died like everyone else, or almost everyone else. Ollie had survived. Best to kill those memories, Lars said. They'll eat you alive, and they'll do it just as good as the beasts. Lars walked off, leaving Ollie in that chair by the fire, his body still, his eyes fixed on the flames. The old Strazar could say what he wanted, believe what he wanted, but Ollie knew the truth. Memories couldn't die.